Well, I've really been looking forward to this one. This is Steve Cordes, CEO of Youth Opportunities Unlimited, affectionately known by everybody else is YOU. Steve, thanks for coming today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Glenn. I'm looking forward to it myself as well. This is a great conversation and love sitting down with you.
You and I go way back, but not together. This is really interesting. Do you remember about 7, 8 years ago, you and I had to make presentation to the Trillium Foundation. Their regional meetings were here in London, and you and I spoke. And I realized then I started in 1986 at the food bank. I think you started 2 years before that. Is that correct? When did you start at YOU?
Yeah. I started in 84. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a long time. So that's 37 years for you, 35 years for me. But what we realized at that presentation is we'd never been together before doing a presentation.
I remember that moment. I think we were at
Yeah.
the Lamplighter or something, and it was a Trillium event, and thinking, oh my gosh, because everybody else assumed, okay, you two folks would know each other well and so on. We know of each other really well, but not had the opportunity to actually sit together in an event like that and actually be on a panel together and so on. Absolutely.
Yeah, it was really, I just found it so fascinating. London seems like such a small town, and then something like that comes up, and it's just the way that it is. I did want to, part of the reason why we're getting these videos going is that to help people understand the broader context of they're hearing about poverty or homelessness or unemployment, mental health, drug and addictions, all of these things. And I think to put a context to them is very helpful. But before we get into that, I have always been fascinated at watching YOU. I'm just being honest. Like, I think of the things that, you have youth centers. You now have a youth shelter, which I'd like you to go into just a little bit. I was out there getting a tour of it. That's all very exciting. But I think you do things like around career services, counseling services. And then you have a thing called Jones Place, which I love because I know that person well who it was named after. Could you give us a quick 5-minute overview of all the things that YOU is doing right now?
Absolutely, Glenn. Thanks so much. And one of the things that excites me about all of that is over the last 37 years, YOU has been around since 1982. I joined it in 84, been the director since 88. And I love the fact that if our founding group was to drop in and see YOU now, they would see a larger organization, but they would see an organization rooted in the same values.
Yeah.
And I love that. When we started in the early 80s, it was all about how does an organization respond to the unique needs of young people and help them find success. And for the most part, that was helping them return to school, go to work, get some training programs, and start developing a path towards a career. In the time since those very early days and where we're at right now, we've rounded out the menu of services quite deeply, but ultimately so that we can still help youth along that path. But in the early to mid 80s, if we had a young person experiencing homelessness, we had no solution for them. Yeah. We could give them pieces of paper with referrals, but we had no response, really. We had a housing program actually as early as 1985, but it was a loans program for first and last month's rent. And so a significant hurdle to getting an apartment is putting a deposit down and that coming up with that first month's rent while you start a job and so on. So it certainly met a need, but it didn't fundamentally address the issues of somebody who wasn't on a track to get a job right now, because right now they were facing some other barriers that prevented them from getting a job. And I'm really excited over the depth of services that have been rounded out over these decades, really, because they've allowed the organization to not say no fundamentally to any young person that walks in the door that says, I need your help. Whereas in the early 80s, we could help with the resume, we could help with job search skills, we could certainly help even with job placements. I was their very first job developer. But what we couldn't help with is somebody who was a few steps before that and said, but tonight I'm crashing with a friend, I'm sleeping outside, or I'm in a shelter, and I've never drawn a paycheck before. Like, I can't talk about work today. we would send them away.
Yeah.
And now we don't. So what we've rounded out with some of the examples you just talked about, our social enterprise models we started creating in the early to mid 1980s, so almost 30 years ago now. So we run a recycling service, we run a wood shop, we have a cafe, as you know, with a very significant footprint in the food and beverage industry. Not because we want to run a restaurant or a recycling business or whatever, but it speaks to the needs of those young people that would walk in our doors that have never drawn a paycheck before. And our experience taught us early on that the process would dumb down their expectations to the point of, if you've never drawn a paycheck before, don't worry about a job you want or like. Get your foot in the door, build a career, and so on. Those are very strongly middle-class based values. And for a young person that wasn't grown in that, raised in that environment, that hadn't thought about a career, but really thinks about a job and an income and so on, a career is often a foreign concept. But what they like, what they don't like is not. And what they're good at, what they're not good at is not. So the idea of these social enterprises is to create a platform where we can train people, not even because they want to work in the food industry necessarily, but help them understand what the world of work is all about. What it's like to be part of a team, what it's like to do a good
In a
job and
secure
get feedback.
context, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The shelter experience, similarly, there are shelters in town for sure, but a young person who's never experienced homelessness before, a young person who's 18 years old, is different than a 40-year-old person who's experienced shelters, and not higher or more severe in needs or whatever, but it's a different mindset. Typically, young people were not going into our shelter system. They're choosing to sleep outside because they would choose to be on their own. They maybe physically felt safer. They were, I think, afraid of, if I go into that adult system, am I going to be in a shelter system for the next 20, 30 years? And the answer was often no. But the fear stopped them from walking in the door even. Yeah. So we were able, with our partners, with advisors on how to build this thing, with funding from the City of London, private donations, money from the federal government, put together a unique model that is housing first based, which means that we're helping people find housing and other success, not just a shelter, but it's a unique space that is for youth only. So it was full within 2 weeks of being open, and it's been full every night since. And it's not just that's not something to get excited about with a shelter, but to get excited about with a shelter is so many people have developed careers. So many people have gotten jobs, gotten permanent housing, because their starting point was a place that they felt safe. And that fundamentally is where we're taking Jones Place as well, is looking at how do we create that footprint for young families. We used to have something, Bethesda House, we're run by Salvation Army for a long time. And they retired that model a number of years ago for a lot of really good reasons. It was an older model, but the needs of young women and young families who were experiencing homelessness didn't go away, of course. And the challenge, of course, is that we have young people right now living in London that are hiding their pregnancy because they're afraid to lose access to their baby, or have lost access to their child, not because they can't be a custodial parent, but because they don't have a place to live. If you don't have a place to live, you can't have a child. You can't provide the necessaries of life if you don't have a safe and stable housing yourself. Yeah. So Jones Place would be so fundamental in creating safe and stable housing for young women, young families, and other young people, so that from there it's the launch pad into other success.
And how far along are you on Jones Place? Like, I think it's fair to say that it's named after Joan Smith, that the family has donated to it. Joan was a rock in this community for so long, a provincial politician, right? It's so involved in nonprofits and charities here in London, along with her family. You've named it after Joan, who passed away a while ago, but how far along are you in that, to getting that established?
Well, we've got a campaign cabinet, and some of Joan's children have been on that cabinet along with other community members, and they have rocked. Like, we've raised, I think, over $8 million.
Wow.
Not counting government funding. That's money from people like you and me and members of our community, corporations, and so on that have said, we want to make this happen. The federal government, the City of London have also stepped forward with some funding. So we're now at the point where we're actually expecting to go shovel in the ground in the next few months. We're just finalizing an RFP with some drawings and so on. Our architect is just finishing off the mechanical drawings and so on. And then from there, it'll be ready for a RFP. And we hope to have the contractor selected in the spring. And then based on when they're available to start, we'll see demolition of what is going to come down at the old GT's location. And then on from there, we'll start building it up. And it'll be so excited about that. It'll be such a game changer.
And people can give to that right now, even now, correct? So
we're still fundraising, absolutely. So even when we start construction, there'll still be another level of fundraising. We'll have enough resources to start the job. We can borrow against the project and so on. But if we end the day with a lot of borrowing, that's money that we're going to service debt on rather than put into the programs and the people that live in that building. And we want to put every dollar that comes into YOU into our programs, not borrowing costs.
Can we shift subjects a bit and talk about homelessness? I know this is all kind of sucked all the oxygen out of the room really in London in the last couple of years, especially as a result of COVID or with the winter shelter program. We as a food bank are partnered with you on that. You've got folks at YOU Cafe making homeless lunches. But it's young people that are making it, and it's going out to folks that are young people. I think people understand about homelessness to a certain degree and what's going on, and we've definitely all been getting an education in the last couple of years. I would presume that youth homelessness is another matter altogether, right? That it's different. And I just wonder if you could explain it. It's not so much because they lost a job or whatever it is, a unique set of circumstances go into that. How is it that youth become homeless?
That's a great question, Glenn. And so often, I mean, by definition of the age group, they almost always have family around them somewhere, right? It often is challenges in the family.
Yeah.
It's not always related strictly to poverty. It's not necessarily family that can't afford. Family that often is under some financial distress, but not always. But for whatever reason, the family starts breaking down, and that could be parents remarry and challenges within a new blended family. That could be addictions issues, mental health issues, either with the child, with parents, with siblings, that create chasms in a family, and then that lead to those children, that child, less and less and less a member of the family, and more and more outside the family for supports, friends, and so on. And then school suffers, and before you know it, somebody's staying with friends, and then on over to becoming truly, living outside and sleeping rough, right? So it is a different population, because if we can find ways to reunify, and we have a significant diversion program as part of our homelessness response, how do we get people connected with family members or people that are trusted, people that care about them, maybe can't even house them, but continue to be those supports and those resources, right? Then we can help people in a significant way in that way. Addictions issues are significant. Mental health issues are significant. So we're not an addictions counseling organization. We're not a mental health organization, but we are a youth organization. So we can bring youth in and then help them find the right partners for their care. So often it's not feeling like they belong anywhere. And the fact that they can walk in the door and feel like they're in a safe place, in a place they belong, means so much. Some of your viewers, I'm sure you know this, but some of your viewers might not know that unfortunately London is the significant hotbed for human trafficking. And it's heartbreaking how often, and it does affect particularly young women who are experiencing homelessness. And it's heartbreaking how often we hear stories of young girls and young women from 16, 17 on up into their early 20s that become victims of trafficking. They don't get to just walk away from that because they've
They're
been
trapped.
changed. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're a commodity, they're trafficked, they're taken out of their community. They're a commodity that's been bought and sold. And
Mhm.
so the supports that it takes to help somebody who's gone through trafficking is intense because their fundamental trust in other people has been broken. So how do you help rebuild that trust? And it's not a matter of just getting an apartment. It's not a matter of just coming in the door. It's a rehabilitative process and a learning to retrust and to be safe and cautious. It takes time. So that's one example of how youth
Mm.
homelessness is unique compared to others.
Yeah. Wow. Can we talk big picture for a bit? Steve, you'd be the right person to talk about it. But I know back in, I think it was the 70s or whatever it is, youth in the Canadian population were about 20%.
Yeah.
I was reading a Stats Canada report a couple of months ago that talked about how by 2030, youth will probably be 11% of the Canadian population. Now, I've worked in Ottawa, as you know, and I know that the groups that tend to have influence are the groups that have the numbers, right? So I think of the baby boomers, for instance, and what they've been able to do. That makes sense to me. And now there's more and more, of diversity and things like. And as those numbers grow, they're able to, begin to move within the system and get the system to pay attention, but also to provide some resources. So it's something like the food bank, for instance. We help 9,000 people a month, but 39% of those are youth. That's a big amount, right? So when somebody is looking at that, they're going, well, gee, I really want to help with that. But really, in the larger picture, it seems to me that youth could run the danger of becoming more and more isolated and eclipsed because of these numbers. That governments or policymakers or others are going to sit there and look at it and look at the larger numbers and try to help them. I could be way off on that, but I just know that from my time in Ottawa and part of what we were working on with the poverty file, a lot of other things came before youth did. I would like to know from you if that has been your sense, and do you have a worry about the future if the youth number continues to go down? You can be honest, because I'm worried about it.
I am, and it's so funny. We were just talking about that exact issue earlier this week with our management, and as we're doing budget planning and so on around our programs, right? And
Yeah.
at this point, we haven't seen that kind of trend play out in what's available from a funding point of view. But you're right, it is a trend that concerns us, and I think that although there's no easy response at all, I think that the issue becomes we're already seeing such skilled labor shortages impact businesses, whether some businesses can even open the hours they want to open and so on. And so many businesses continue to operate understaffed. So as much as it becomes a heart-driven issue for me and you and people like us in the community, there's also going to have to be a head-driven issue of we can't afford not to have anybody participating in our labor market, not just from the social cost of supporting people who are not in the job market, but also too from the cost of having unmet labor shortages and so on. So I think that the dialogue out of organizations like YOU will continue to be, we can't as a community afford to lose the opportunity that any individual brings to the table in our economy. We're going to need everybody. And I think, well, that's the academic argument. For me, the heart is, I know the people that we talk about when we talk about people being lost, and our staff knows them. And so we're driven not by that economic driver, but by, the young person that has never drawn a paycheck, feels like they're at the end of their rope when they're 18 or 20 years old. And I think that should be a time when you feel like the world is your oyster and it's about to open up for you.
Yeah.
And for anybody at 20 to feel the exact opposite is heartbreaking. Yeah. So for us, it's always going to be about how do we help that 20-year-old feel that the world is their oyster. Yeah. The challenge will be how do we continue to inform and educate and advocate the government and our funders continue to see that if it's 11% of the population, it's 11% that needs significantly more investment than that we would normally give 11% of a non-voting population.
Yeah. It seems to me as governments continue to say that they are running out of funds, it then becomes more and more of a competition. Homelessness is a good example. Mental health is a good example, right? All of these people doing great work, but all having to come to the same place in most cases to get funding. And I do think, I have wondered about it, that young people tend to fall in behind a filter, if I can use that's the wrong word, you would know it better than I would. But when we think of adults in poverty, or we think of adults with mental illness or whatever it is, there's kind of direct ways that we can get involved and help there. But when it comes to youth, we see them as belonging, to parents or something. And there's kind of a hesitancy to move through that veil or that filter to be able to help them. And yet, if you were to ask us what we care about the most, right, it is the young people. That's what we want to do. But that societal norms that are there that rightfully kind of are filters between society and young people can sometimes hold us back from the ability to move forward to be able to help. And it seems to me, and I'm not just saying this because I'm talking to you, but YOU is so fundamental to all of that, because unless you help us to find a way to give, to volunteer, to help, we're not naturally going to be able to do that because we don't know how to approach that field. And YOU, to me, has become this key voice that's helping us to understand, that whole generation of people that we wouldn't normally know what to do with, and also that might be losing a priority status when it comes to the funding models. If it's not for you, and if it's not for your team at YOU, we won't know how to navigate that turf. Am I correct?
You are, and you're right. So many times we think about it as, well, that's still the family's responsibility, that's the parents' responsibility, and so on, or friends of family, and so on, and all that stuff. And the great sweet spot around that stuff is where we can just take it to be a community response and a community responsibility. And I know that sounds simplistic, but I do think that that's how we solve these issues. And that to the extent that family can continue to support people, absolutely. We have sometimes the misnomer that I hear a lot about for even in our shelter, in our housing programs, where a donor or somebody, it's often community members will say, yeah, well, those folks don't have family that's there to help.
Yeah,
that is often not true. They often have family that is there to help, but what they maybe don't have is family that they can live with, because maybe geographically that family is not even nearby. Maybe there's just you can care about somebody but not be able to live with them. And so our shelter at Christmas time is fairly empty Christmas Day and Boxing Day and over the holidays, because they're visiting family. And not everybody, it's heartbreaking when they have nobody, and that does happen, but it's not an either or. It doesn't mean that they can go live with family because of lots of other challenges, because we forget sometimes too, what I hear from family members who've been on the other side of this equation is, I love my child. I want my child to have success, and I want to be part of my child's success, but my child just can't live at home because of, an addictions issue, a mental health issue. It might even be their own challenges as a parent. I don't have the resources to support this person. And so for whatever reason, I want to be part of it, but I can't be the solution. And sometimes that's as simple as helping them find a job, return to school, and so on. And sometimes it's providing an apartment or shelter.
If I can be honest with you, I think, we as a food bank, we've enjoyed good support here in London, as you have at YOU. But when COVID came, we realized that people that are most vulnerable, the public was giving so much, and so were governments, and so were businesses. So we were very, very fortunate. But we looked at it and thought, how do we get to the most vulnerable? Right? We support 40 other agencies. We help with all of those things, but we knew that there was a lot of homelessness going on. And so we got the homeless lunch program going, and part of that was with YOU and what you folks are doing. But the reality is that an organization like ours, with the mandate that it has and a real desire to make a difference in the community, could not navigate that turf. We didn't know how to do that. So we looked to you and we looked to YOU to do that. And that partnership was established and it's been great. And I'm not trying to talk about the food bank, but I think whether it's an individual citizen in London, whether it's a church or a social service club or a business or whatever, I mean, these are not easy things to navigate, and yet people want to navigate them. They want to find a way forward, but they need a guide. And it's been my sense that in YOU, I've known about YOU for over 3 decades. I think it's so highly respected in the community. But you do more than just provide a service. You are a guide into a world that a lot of people would like to understand, but don't even know where to begin. And I just really want to congratulate you on that. I think the fact that you've kept your original mandate, but that you've continued to grow it's a wonderful thing. And you've had a renaissance and all these other things that have happened. But through it all, we would never have really been able to see or act in that world if it wasn't for what you did. And I hope you see that, because for me as a food bank director, I did not have that wisdom or that knowledge. And you have helped us as a food bank to navigate that turf. And it's been a powerful thing for us. I hope you see that that's what you're doing.
Well, thanks so
Not
much.
just for
No, I appreciate that so much. And, people say, oh, you've got this amazing building, you've got this amazing program and so on. The biggest thing we have is the culture at YOU. And that culture is, whenever possible, anything we do with a partner. So we can only provide strong mental health supports if we have a mental health partner that's with us in that journey.
Yeah.
What we can provide is like you so well put around our partnership with the food bank. We can provide that safe launch pad for young people where they feel like this is a place that they want to engage in. Yeah. And I think one of the things I left off when we talked about the unique nature of youth and homelessness, one of the unique natures I think that makes it very unique for them is homelessness for so many young people is all about finding a new family. And some of the people that are experiencing homelessness, they've got a family of support with them that they would call a street family, or a family that they've got to trust. And that family, they have each other's back. Yeah. When things are unsafe, that family supports each other. Yeah. There's trade-offs for sure. And that means when you're ready to move on from homelessness, you're leaving a family behind. You've already lost some other nature of a family. Now you're leaving another family. And I had a young person put it to me, and I'll never forget. She spoke at our breakfast a number of years ago. And her quote to me that I will never forget is, people have to understand, when you leave homelessness, when you choose to leave homelessness, you leave everything behind. Yeah. And to me, I think like, wow, like that, to me, that was an epiphany, because I got the point of it beforehand, but to hear somebody who has truly lived outside for years, that started when she was 18, and how hard it was to leave homelessness, not because she didn't want more for herself, but she had to leave everybody she knew behind. And she hoped that they would come with her in that journey, and some did, some did not. And some died. And she assumed she would be part of that until she started feeling that space. And I appreciate your comment, to circle back on that. I think that is the greatest value we bring in. For us, it's all about community. We can only help young people get employment if there's a community of employers and businesses that are willing to hire somebody who has never drawn a paycheck before, doesn't have a resume, because why would we put on a resume just to fill out a piece of paper? Some people have amazing resumes that we deal with, but some don't. And the ones that don't aren't necessarily any less capable of doing the job than somebody who has an amazing resume. But you need a trusted group of employers and businesses that look at that and say, I'll meet with this person, and if this person's a fit, I won't worry about what they've done before, but I'll see if I can work with them. That doesn't happen because an organization helps somebody with a resume or a job search. That helps because there's a community of support around that person.
Steve, thanks for guiding me. And I don't mean just in this talk, but in the last couple of years, we have a mandate as a food bank. We have, but sometimes we can't reach where we need to. It's beyond our capacity sometimes to even understand. And YOU has given us that capacity. rather than us trying to start something new, let's just work with what is there, with what YU is doing. But I know that you've done that for the city and for other funders. Thank you for that, having that kind of presence. You do more than just deliver programs or it provide encouragement. You provide an access point for so many in the community to understand it better. We really appreciate YU, and I thank you for doing this today, Steve.
I've enjoyed our conversation, Glenn, and it's very mutual. The food bank, and I know you're not looking for this, but it does provide such a pivotal, a life-changing role for people that need the food bank. And the fact that we're able to partner together and create that access for young people specifically to benefit from all those services together just really means a lot to me, to our team, and certainly to the young people that are experiencing all this support. It's great.
You and I are now partners through our organizations, yet we still hardly see one another. It's an amazing
I know.
thing. We'll have to rectify that the best we can. Thank you, Steve. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Glenn.